Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. It is officially the end of 2018, another great year for film, as the years always are. I know a lot of people will often say, oh, what a bad year for movies, what a terrible year for movies. That's if you just go see the baseline of cinema, right? You have to seek out the great films, and last year when I made this list, I think I had seen a lot more movies that really stuck with me and resonated with me, whereas this year, I think I've more consistently seen films that I've walked out of and gone, those were very good. It's the year of very good. Whereas I think like my top 5 for this year are the ones that really have carried with me throughout the entirety of 2018, no matter how recently or in the past I've seen them. These are the ones that I find really special. Now keep in mind the title and keep in mind what I'm discussing. These are my favorite films of 2018. This is a very separate list from what I would believe to be the best movies of 2018. That may be a list that I compile and also make a video on sometime in the future, but these are the movies I enjoyed the most. When I think back to the titles and sequences from this film, I get chills, I get goosebumps. I saw 101 movies in theaters this year, which is an absurd amount for a high school student, and it's an absurd amount of money, and it is an absurd amount of hours. But these are the 10% out of those films that I found to be just my favorites, the ones I'm going to think about in the coming years, the ones I'm going to remember when I think back to 2018 and go, man, yeah, I remember seeing that, I remember seeing that, I remember loving it. So, without further ado, let me get into this. Wow. Let me get into this list. I want to talk about 6 quick honorable mentions, and when I say quick, I do mean like 1 to 2 sentences, because I know how much a lot of you guys loved the amount of talking and nose rubbing that I did in the Oscar predictions video. I do read the comments, all of them, don't worry. First honorable mention I want to describe, these are, I believe, in order of release, is Deadpool 2. Not being a huge fan of the first Deadpool, I thought it was good. I think this film pretty much improves upon everything that it really needed to improve upon. The comedy is better, other than this dog shit.
Because you look like Freddy Krueger face fuck a topographical map of Utah.
The action is choreographed beautifully. It's directed by one of the best action directors working right now, even if he's not the greatest director of plot, which Atomic Blonde sort of shows. The meticulous craft when it comes to creating an action movie like this often shows when it's done right, and I think Deadpool 2, in its excellent, damn near perfect pacing, and the fact that 99% of the comedy lands and all of the action is in some way inventive and new, at least made it stick with me enough to get an honorable mention on my list. Isle of Dogs, I'm also putting on there. Being someone who can be kind of back and forth on Wes Anderson films, it really depends if they work for me just on a story and script basis. This film checked both of those boxes. I really appreciated the world that this film built. I think Wes Anderson is really great at doing that when he really puts his heart and soul into it, and I could tell this was something of a passion project for him, I think. The claymation, stop-motion animation really, really works. It's a beautiful looking film. I did like the dialogue a lot. I know that's sometimes more of a divisive element of this film when it's being discussed, but I think it really helps with defining the characters and building them as the story moves along, because I think the story moves so well, and that really does help the characters move along so well. It's easy to just have a dog in your film and make people connect to it, but when you can really make a dog a character and you can really care for these characters as they move through their journey, I think that's really something special. Three Identical Strangers is the one documentary I'm kind of going to mention on this list. I really found that film to be expertly structured. It moves so well. It's the first documentary to twist and end my ass like several times. I found myself completely immersed in the story, very interested in the story. I saw the film twice in theaters, and I wound up watching it again in my psychology class, and each and every time I found some kind of new layer to the film that I didn't expect out of documentaries. I'm not a huge documentary connoisseur, so it's really interesting for me when I see a documentary that really sticks with me. The reason I don't have Won't You Be My Neighbor on this list, a film I did see, I didn't know much about Mr. Rogers. I knew who he was. I knew his, a little bit of his story, and I knew how much connection he had to youth in a past generation, but it didn't stick with me just because I didn't have as much of a connection to that material. I recognize how well done the documentary was. It just wasn't my favorites of the year. I have Searching on here just because that theater experience was so damn incredible for me. The directors of Unfriended, this is genuinely how those films should be made. You can tell the amount of work and detail layered into every shot. Unfriended kind of used their desktop style as a gimmick, and this movie doesn't use it as a gimmick. It uses it to convey information in a creative and original fashion, which is what I really loved out of this film, and it's what I really respected and appreciated out of it. John Cho gives an amazing leading performance that drives the whole thing all the way through. He's an actor we've all known has great talent, and he's finally given a chance to really showcase it. It delivers twists in a fashion I've never seen before, and in just a chilling fashion. It's a fantastic film that develops character in a way that you wouldn't expect a movie like this to do. This barely squawked out making my top 10, just barely. This was really close to being number 10. The next one I want to talk about is First Man, and the reason this didn't make my top 10 list I think is kind of my fault. I saw this at a really late hour, and I never got a chance to get back to theaters to seeing it again. But I do recall remembering and appreciating how strong the direction was. Damien Chazelle has obviously, secured himself a name as a director, and I think each of his films have sort of come with a different style when it comes to directing. I don't think any of the three of them have looked or felt the same, and this one is a very unique feel. I like what they do in terms of cinematography and direction, in terms of getting you into the feel of what they were doing with the film and the entire journey that these characters are put on. I think that they do a really great job putting you in their shoes, so that you really understand the hardships and troubles that they went through to make this. I really wish I remembered more from it. It's going to have to be something I see again, but I remember just the visual aesthetic being something that really drove it home for me. And the final honorable mention I want to bring up really quick is The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan, and I think this movie really showcases their talents, not just as directors, but as writers. All 6 of these stories that they convey, I loved all 6 of them, actually. I think they managed to do so much with character, and so much with actually just telling a small story within such a limited amount of time, even if it takes place, across an entire town or just in a carriage. That's something that I think only the 2 of them can do, and I think their talents are so well brought across in this film. So, without further ado, let's get into the actual top 10. At number 10, I have the movie Thoroughbreds, which is a movie that I saw much earlier in the year, but one that I still find to sort of give me chills when I think about now. I really love the style of this movie. I love the overall look of the film, for one. I think the color palette is fantastic, and it really complements a lot of the sequences and the tone that it's trying to convey. But the direction of it is so unique. What they do so well, I think, is directing character, in the sense that, there's always sort of this juxtaposition when it comes to tone with character. Like when the 2 girls are talking, there's some things that they'll say that are so out of whack, but the way it's put together and the way it's edited and the way it's shot, oftentimes unbroken in that sort of fashion, it makes you really take it seriously somehow. And when you're supposed to kind of feel like this is over the top, it's there for a fashion. It's not fashion. It's there for a reason. When they're showing the dad hitting the tennis balls or whatever, and he turns and he just kind of stares up. I mean, you're supposed to be like, this dude is a fucking freak. And I think they convey that so well. There's so much that's well done about this movie. And just when I think about the tone of it, and especially one of those last shots, if you've seen the film, you kind of know what I'm talking about. I just get chills thinking about it. I think the tone is really what this movie did best. I think I did review it a while back. I think it was my first review of 2018. I would definitely recommend seeing it. It's a very underseen, but highly original and told film. The story is just kind of a foundational thing that they build upon with a really strong character relationship, and a lot of times you'd be like, these kids are crazy for wanting to do what they do, but they make certain characters likable enough and certain characters unlikable enough through a very oddly monotone sense that you find yourself genuinely rooting for something you would never want to root for. Number 9, I have Clansmen. I actually saw this movie on the same day that I saw another movie that's higher on my list, but the fact that it managed to sort of stay with me, not just through the viewing experience of that other film, but also just through the rest of the year, really shows how strong this movie stuck with me. I know that sort of as the year has gone on, some people have disliked this movie more, I suppose, or it's just gotten more moderate, mediocre reviews, but Spike Lee is one who's known for really telling a story and using his style in a meaningful fashion, not just doing it style over substance, giving you something to really connect to. And his way of contrasting comedy and drama, I think, is what works so well about this movie, because there are moments where it's supposed to be lighthearted and you kind of feel like these characters are almost having fun doing what they're doing. They're fucking with these guys. They're fucking with the KKK members. And that comes across so well, not just in their writing, but in their performances. Adam Driver and John David Washington and even Topher Grace are fantastic in this film. And the writing, you know, when you're writing half a comedy film, it's got to be funny. And it is funny. I mean, the jokes really work. I would not call it a straight-out comedy. And I think what works about that is Spike Lee sort of goes from his over-the-top kind of stylistic portrayal of certain characters and elements within film that we kind of see throughout his entire filmography. He usually uses those in this movie when it comes to the comedy elements of it. But when you're supposed to actually feel stakes and things are really coming down to the wire, you feel that. He sort of tones it back a little bit. And I think that vibe really comes across in his direction and the way it's shot, and the music and the editing. I think all of that really comes to life when he's trying to actually make you feel something, and it doesn't feel out of place. It's sort of a slow build into that spot. The climax of this film is certainly not a comedic element of it, but when he goes back into that comedy, it works so well because it fits within those characters so well. They build these great sort of dynamic characters that on the surface may not appear that way, but when you really think about how they're portrayed, not just in direction but in performance, there's so much more to them, and they convey that through comedy, which is something that I really appreciate. That's something that's very difficult to do, but again, it's a movie that manages to have stakes and manages to have meaning. The way that this movie ends, I usually would take issue with. It's something that I don't love. I don't love it when movies go out of their way to put statements in their film. Usually I prefer subtlety. I prefer to be driving home from the film and going, oh man, I didn't even think about that when I was watching it, but now I'm thinking about it. Now it's processing in my mind. I think a lot of movies that I would call pandering are ones that do that, and I actually didn't take issue with this ending. I thought it actually added a little something. It gave me, a little heart wrench and something to feel for it, and I know a lot of people don't like that element of it. I find myself to be one of the very few that thought that it added a layer, in a sense, to this already fantastic movie. Number 8 is Green Book, which, despite oftentimes feeling like a TV movie, still really resonated with me, and I think a lot of why I loved it was the cheesiness of it. And that's something that I often take issue with in the movies that I dislike the most. Cheesiness is something that I am a real stickler about. But what really worked about this movie for me was how it used its elements of cheesiness and being over the top to almost ground the movie even more. I've talked at length about Viggo Mortensen's character, for instance, and how he's just this stereotypical Italian mobster. But they use that so that when his humane moments come in and when his character is developing over the course of the film, it really almost hits you home even more, right? When it sort of dials it back, and it dials like the comedy back, kind of like Black Klansman does, you really start to feel this connection to this character. You really understand how humane he is, and I think Mahershala Ali and his character helps to complement that and the style of the film overall, because that's something that carries out the entire film. It's not just Viggo Mortensen's character. It's something that does feel very over the top and out there and comedic until all of a sudden they sort of peel back that layer and let you see under it, okay, there's actually something interesting and important going on here. Mahershala Ali's character is so, toned down and very calm and relaxed that in those moments where he's over the top, you feel it that much more. You feel this connection to these human characters, and they manage to put one on a pedestal and one down here, and then all of a sudden they level the two together where you're understanding that both of them are these human people. Both of these characters are people that we should understand and connect with and see both sides of the argument, because there's a lot of elements of this movie where you want to go, oh, he's right, oh, he's right. No, they both should be right. And in a movie that's completely centric around this relationship, that relationship has to work. And I know a lot of people, like I said, take issue with the cheesiness of this movie, but I think it's there purposefully. I think that they're trying to convey that to you, and I think that it works really, really goddamn well, and that's why this film has stuck with me most out of many of these just 1 to 2 people relationship films. Number 7, let's get a little more mainstream here, is Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse. I think what will always show a good Spider-Man film is one that gets the character of Spider-Man right. It's why the Amazing Spider-Man films failed, whereas a lot of people find the Tobey Maguire ones to work, and where a lot of people find the Tom Holland one to work. I personally thought Homecoming was the best Spider-Man movie. I thought that was the one that had gotten the character of Peter Parker, not just Peter Parker, but Spider-Man correct. But Into the Spider-Verse was given something new to do. They were given a new character to play with. They were given Miles Morales, who we've never really seen on the big screen. And for me, the reason this movie works so well is because he works so well. Is because you have such a connectable protagonist. I hate the excuse it's just a kid's movie for any film. That's a wrong excuse. There are so many kids' films with extra depth and something more to look at. You look at the golden age of Pixar, and there's so much more to unravel within those films. And this is one that really has that. It has the emotion. It has the impact that you're looking for with a movie in general, not just with an animated movie. You know, the moments of emotion aren't contrived, like I think a lot of animated movies that came out this year were, like The Grinch. You know, they think that just showing me a kid, and the kid's crying, all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to feel sad. If I don't feel a connection to the character, I'm not going to give a shit. If I don't feel a connection to the character and his connections with other characters, I'm not going to give a shit. But they develop Miles so well, and his relationship with his father, and I thought the one thing that was underdeveloped was his relationship with his uncle, but as a whole, you really feel the outer circle of him, and not just his connection with his family, but with the other Spider-Men, that it manages to stick with you on this emotional level, while also being this absolutely just thrill ride. The action is great. The animation has, not just been talked, you know, from me, but by everyone at an extreme length. I love the contrasting styles of animation. I think it makes it that much better. Even though some of the other Spider-Men aren't given the same amount of screen time as others, they all manage to be that much more familiar with the audience, and they all stick with you. You're going to remember all of them, and you're going to remember a little bit of something from each of them, because they're that distinct, and they're that well done, and they each have that different of elements to them, whether it's the animation or the voice acting or the writing or whatever it may be. This is a film that truly has an understanding of animation, of character design, of set design, of action, and just of emotion in general, and as a whole, it really, really works as just a film. At number 6, I have Roma. I really appreciate movies that make directors work, in a sense. I really like the movies that you can tell a director is not just getting by. You know, they're not making this movie with ease, and then they're sending it off to theaters and sending it off to Netflix in this case and saying, okay, that's done, just tell me what you think. Alfonso Cuarón is never a director that's had that problem for me. Even with, like, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, he's clearly processing every shot and what all of it builds up to and composes to. Though I'm not a big fan of Gravity, I still think he did a really great job with that, and Roma really highlights his talents as a meticulous director because everything is so strongly put together. Every shot has such this dynamic purpose that you may not see right when you're watching it, but I promise you on your drive home, or at least in the next couple of days, you start to understand a little more about these elements of the film that you didn't in the past. I mean, literally, that's what I loved about Get Out last year, was that, you know, every shot, there's so much going on, whether it's in the center of the frame or on the side of the frame, and that is a film that makes a director work. It takes a true vision to be able to look at that script, whether you wrote it or not, and be able to say, okay, this is what I want exactly with this, and then be able to get out there and make it happen. Roma not only does that, but that adds to its story layers so well, because it is sort of a foundational story. It's a pretty baseline story, and it really takes like an hour to truly kick off. But there's so much subtlety going on when it comes to story development. So many little moments that mean so much that I appreciate on such a strong level when it comes to filmmaking. Yalitza Aparizu's character, I hope that's right, is so well handled, is so well done. There are a lot of movies this year that were just mishandling characters, and this is a movie that handles a character so well. You don't see the character break down and cry in random moments just for the sake of contrived emotion. There is a climactic moment in this character that feels natural and genuinely makes it feel like this has changed for this person forever, and the story moves in such a flowing and brilliant fashion that all feels very natural. Alright, this is where a lot of you are going to click off the video, so I need you to stick with me, okay? I need you to stick with me because these are my favorite films. Alright? Just hold on. Let me make my case, okay? Because at number 5, I am putting Mission Impossible Fallout. Yeah, I'm putting Mission Impossible over Roma. Just hear me out, okay? I grew up on the Mission Impossible films from a very young age. My parents were showing me them. They were big fans of the franchise. I remember this shot absolutely horrifying me in my middle school / elementary school age. But these are movies that I always just saw as, oh, it's a big popcorn, you know, whatever, it's fun to go see. And this is the first time that I think one of these films has changed the standard for action, because I think oftentimes action films are sort of shipped off to the side as their own separate category, right? Action films cannot particularly always be seen as a great film. They can't be put in that pool of art house films and drama films and social commentary films. You know, they're their own separate thing. Action films can't just be great. But this is a great movie. I was just talking about directors that have to work. Christopher McQuarrie is such a fantastic fit for this film, because I think him and Tom Cruise have a very similar viewpoint when it comes to this franchise. They want kick-ass action that's not easy to do, but is going to be visually stunning and is going to have you on the edge of your seat the entire time, while also giving you a story that's pretty simplistic to follow, that adds on top of it with interesting character layers and story layers and, you know, things that action films don't take the time to flesh out very often. There are a lot of great action movies that don't have a whole lot of plot to them, and this one does a really good job at building off of the fifth film. Oftentimes these are usually their own standalone movies, and I think that the plot is actually one of the better elements of this film. It kind of makes you think a little bit, even though you would go into this expecting a mindless film. There's something more to this. There's something to walk away with. And Christopher McQuarrie doesn't treat you like a dumbass. I guess, spoiler alert, but if you didn't see Henry Cavill coming as the villain, you missed the point. It's not supposed to be a twist. You know, it's one of those things that it's become clear later in the film that the characters know that, and you're supposed to know that. He doesn't treat you like an idiot, which is something I think a lot of these superhero movies do wrong. I think that's something Black Panther did wrong, in making you think Black Panther was dead for 20 minutes. Like, don't do that shit. I really do think this has changed the expectation for action films, for stunt work, for all of these things, for the way an action movie is shot. If I recall correctly, Fallout is shot on film, and it shows. It looks fantastic. It is a thrill ride. It is an immersive film ride that will take you on a journey with these characters that maybe you've grown to love, maybe you're just now seeing them for the first time. Regardless, there is something to get out of this for everyone. This is the other movie that I saw on the same day I saw BlacKkKlansman, and even though this one stood out so far in my mind, BlacKkKlansman still managed to do the same, but I did find this one to be superior, at least in terms of my enjoyment. Number 4, I have A Star Is Born. This is actually a movie that if I were to make like a best films list of 2018, I think this would be a lot lower. It'd probably be closer to like 9 or 10. But upon reviewing this and seeing it a second time, it stuck with me more. A lot of its themes and a lot of the work that it does in terms of a journey really have resonated in my mind, because the film, similarly to Green Book, is completely centric around a relationship that has to work for the film to work. The chemistry between Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga helps with that. The writing of their two characters, not just in their own setup, but in their actual relationship, helps that. Bradley Cooper's clear vision of direction works with that, and all of that adds up to a very natural feeling and natural moving relationship, similarly to something like Call Me By Your Name last year, which is so centric around those two characters. But there's so much more working with this film, and I particularly think that the performances obviously are a huge part of it, the writing is a huge part of it, but the direction from Bradley Cooper was particularly what wound up astonishing me. Not only the fact that he takes you on this journey, because that's what I think the entire movie is about, is seeing these characters change as a result of knowing one another, and, you know, the benefits that each other have with you know, Bradley Cooper giving Lady Gaga her start, and then where she goes in that, and how that spirals Bradley Cooper out of control. I think that's all done very naturally, not just in writing, but in direction. But he brings to life this very natural feeling film in respect to, yes, the characters, but also in modernistic music. I'm not a huge music guy, I don't know a ton about music, but I did see this film with someone involved in the music industry, and I agreed with them largely in the thrill of performance is brought across so well in this film. It's not easy to make an audience feel like they're on stage with a character in front of this massive audience, and this is your moment to shine. This is your moment to show everyone what that's like. I think the opening scene does that so well, and I think the shallow scene does that so well. I think it's done very well all across the board with the sound design, the cinematography, the direction, the performances. It all adds up to this perfect vibe and tone that is going to leave you with a smile on your face through the first 75% of the movie, and then it's going to stab you in the fucking heart in the last 25% of this film. There was, again, with something like, you know, Black Klansmen or Roma, there was a clear vision going into this film, and I think Bradley Cooper put it together in the best way that he possibly could have while managing to update the other Star is Borns that I actually haven't seen, but I've heard about, and I know that this film is a modernistic take on that story, and I think he manages to put his own spin on it really, really well. At number 3, I have If Beale Street Could Talk, which is one of the most recent films I've seen. It was the second to last movie I saw this year, one that I didn't expect to love, and boy did I love this film. I liked it more than I liked Moonlight back a couple years ago, actually. Barry Jenkins has proven himself to be one hell of a storyteller. He manages to not just write this film to perfection. I love the script. I think the dialogue is quick and it's fast, but it's also meaningful and impactful. You really feel not just the relationship between the two main characters, but between the families. And even though, you know, some of those characters never show up again, they still stick with you for the rest of the film. They have a reason for being there. There's nothing in this movie that's just a throwaway. Everything is vital. Everything is pivotal. Everything is important. And as a result of that, you're really understanding the film, which I think is something that a lot of filmmakers don't do right. The way that it's directed in terms of its shot composition, its camera movement, I think is particularly something they do well. And it's something that it's a form of cinematography that Barry Jenkins has sort of managed to put his own stamp on. He's starting to become a bit of an idiosyncratic director, which I really appreciate. He's got a very similar look and a very similar tone of music when it comes to a lot of these movies. Moonlight and this one. But I don't know. This one I don't have a ton to say other than the fact that I felt completely immersed for 2 hours. I really felt the ups and downs of how this movie was going. When a character broke down, I sort of felt that. Everything that happens in this movie managed to have an impact on me. There are 2 little shots I don't like about this thing, and everything else I think is perfect. From the performances to the writing to the direction, I'm pretty straightforward when I look for what I like in a film. If you have strong direction, if you have strong writing, you get strong performances, that's a pretty damn good start. And it's got more than just strong in those 3 elements. It really goes over and above when it comes to those, and it really shows in the final product. I think this is a very important film for a lot more people to see than are actually seeing it. Number 2, I have Hereditary. This was my number 1 for the bulk of the year until I saw something kind of recently that I just think barely surpasses it. But this is a theater experience that I'm never going to forget. I'm not a huge horror film fan. If it's not getting good reviews, I'm not going to go see it. I skipped The Nun. I skipped The Possession of Hannah Grace. But this is a horror movie that has something to say. There is a lot going on in terms of originality and in terms of a vision when it comes to direction that I have to appreciate. The amount of what the fuck moments that are brought across so well and so subtly, which is what the movie does so well, is subtlety, makes this just such a difficult film to craft and such a difficult movie for audiences to like. It's a lot more of a drama at times than it is a horror. It's a lot of times a character study more than it is a horror film, and it works as all of those things. It manages to be so many different styles and genres at once, but work as one coherent piece and one perfectly paced piece. Perfectly shot, perfectly edited, perfectly performed, and just overall perfectly composed film. It's an experience like no other you're going to have, like no other horror film I've seen in a very, very long time. Toni Collette should get the fucking Oscar. She won't be nominated. She absolutely should be. There is so much to love about the originality of this film and the pure inspiration when it comes from horror film. There are a lot of little elements that you can see that come from other horror movies that aren't copied. They're used and fleshed out even further to make this that much more of a terrifying experience. I appreciated the hell out of this movie. I've seen it twice, and it's just so unique and brilliant and the plot goes in so many directions you just don't expect it to go, but it's so well brought to life. I have to appreciate this film. And number one, the big one, the big reveal. What is it? Well, if you've been following me right, you'll know how big of a fan I was of this film. And it's Black Panther. It's Black Panther. Yeah, Black Panther, my favorite film, 2018, right?
What are those?
What are those? What are those? So good! It's so different! It's so different from the other 18 or 19 Marvel movies. There's not one similarity. And this film is so good because Ryan Coogler was clearly given the chance to do something unique. He obviously knew what he was doing. I love Creed, but Ryan, what the fuck were you? No, it's not Black Panther. It's not. I'm sorry. I lied to you. I thought it would be funny. I thought it'd be a good joke. But it wasn't. It's Welcome to Marwen. Welcome to Marwen, everyone. What a great, completely inoffensive film. Yeah. No, they saw it. They saw it over there. They're one of the 3 people in America who saw Welcome to Marwen. Come on, sing it with me. Spirits in my head and they won't go.
People need to see.
Well, the gun still rattles. The gun still rattles. Oh, whoa. That actually like ripped. Oh shit. No, it's the favorite. Like real talk, it's the favorite. I found the favorite. Now listen, I'm a huge Yorgos Lanthimos fan. I think he's obviously one of the most disturbed, yet one of the most original minds in Hollywood right now. He has a way of bringing a story to life that I just think is so unseen by any other director, at the very least working right now. And he manages to bring that to life so well with The Favorite. And I was worried about it because it's much less of an out-there plot. Because he's really great with coming up with plots. So I really wanted to see what he could do with a true story and something that wasn't written by him. And he still manages to create this original film that surpasses everything that's expected out of this genre. I think it's the closest film of this genre we've seen to Barry Lyndon in terms of look and feel and overall character work. It's the closest thing I've seen to Barry Lyndon since, and especially releasing so close to Mary Queen of Scots, you see how well this is done. I think this movie masters character development like no other this year. Who you start out loving, you wind up hating, and it's so natural, and it develops so well throughout the course of 2 hours. It's kind of unreal. The movie's hilarious, but the movie is also fucking heartbreaking. And that emotion is so raw and so well performed out of all 3 of these characters. I loved how the film winds up. Yorgos obviously brings his classic ending that's going to make your fucking head scratch for the next 2 years. There's so much. There's so much to love about the film. The style, the writing, the performances, the production design, the cinematography, even the sound design, the score is beautiful. All across the board, this film is a 10 out of 10. It works all the way through. There's nothing to dislike about this film, in my opinion, and that's why it's my number 1 of the entire year. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for a fantastic 2018. We're moving swiftly into 2019 with more awards coverage and more stuff like that. I'm going to go clean that poster up. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I'd love to hear your top 10 list, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, and why. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for another great year, and I'll see you all next time.